It's just kind of like a ketchup bottle, and then just start fucking smacking it. Oh, wait.
Oh,
Hi, boys. It's live.
Okay, we're on.
We're on. So,
finally doing this.
All right. So yes, cheers to everybody on here.
Cheers. Cheers.
Welcome to the first episode of Let's Talk Music. I'm Adam. We got Rob. We got Colin here. And we're just gonna shoot the shit about music, have fun, have some conversations, hopefully bring you some new music you might not know of, talk about music you do know in ways that you might not have heard before, have some fun with it, share, and just go on a little journey and hope you guys come with us. So, hi to you guys. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's we're both used to talking about music a lot, but this is for me the first time with a microphone in front of my face.
Yeah, now we're gonna record. It's just like our conversations. Only now we get a mic here and a camera.
Yeah, for sure.
Staring at us.
try not to feel
sure.
too claustrophobic.
Yeah, no, we'll be fine. I mean, start like my love of music it comes right from being a child and always having music on in the house. My uncle played guitar, my mom played music all the time in the car. Like, we always had music on. So I've always listened to that and having those kind of influences. A lot of it was really more country based when I was younger. So I have an appreciation for some country, but I also, as I grew, kind of wanted to rebel against that. And I had my Uncle Jody, who showed me a lot more rock and roll, like Kiss and Twisted Sister and stuff. So I got that from him. And, I loved all of that stuff. And listening to all the records that my mom had, all her collection, there was a company called K-Tel that would make various artists records, and it was just all this cool 60s and 70s stuff and like some 50s stuff. I listened to a lot of surf music. That's how I found like Alice Cooper and Trooper. And the biggest one, like the biggest memory for me, is that Meatloaf album and seeing the cover of that and the design on it with this big demon on a motorcycle coming out of flames and fire, and it's just like, holy wow, look at this picture. And then putting it on and hearing Bat Out of Hell, and it just starts with like this squealing guitar and then heavy drum beats, and like even the keyboard was kind of rock and metal, and Meatloaf's voice is so big and strong. And I distinctly just remember hearing that and being like, wow, like this is cool. And exploring all that and realizing like, as much crappy stuff my mom listened to, she also listened to some pretty good stuff too, and finding that rock and metal influences that way. Having my Uncle Sean bringing country to me, learning a lot of that, taking those styles and those influences as I got older. And my music collection at that point was like, I had Michael Jackson Thriller, like everybody my age had
Classic
that
album. Classic album.
It is. Having that one, I had like George Michael, Faith, some other stuff like that, like more pop.
It was really funny. Is with the Thriller album. I was 10 when it came out, and I went to a friend's 10-year-old birthday party, and I gave him that album when it just came out, like brand new. And I was somewhat shunned. It was like, who in the hell is this? It wasn't popular at that point in time. So that was kind of a weird tale to tell when it comes to Thriller, because I mean, it's one of the best albums of all time. And it was like, that got me no cred at all. It worked.
I used to listen to it all the time. I loved it, but it was weird. Like once I found, like, got more into the rock stuff, like that Thriller album was gone. Like I was just overnight, I was done. I was like, nope, not listening to this anymore.
It's still on heavy rotation for me.
I definitely appreciate it a lot more now that I'm older, and I kind of have a better idea of what I'm listening to with it. But when I was a kid, I was like, no, I'm not listening to Michael Jackson. Like, fuck that, I'm old.
Quincy Jones, man, greatest producer of all time.
He is.
Like, that's anything that guy touches, I'm unsold. Like,
so what about your childhood? Where do you come from?
So my parents had terrible taste in music for the most part. I didn't get all my love of music I did not get from my parents at all. It was all just just things I would stumble upon as a kid. Like, my mom was terrible taste in music. My dad, he did like some good stuff. He loved Carlos Santana.
Oh, nice.
That was always something that was playing in the house. So that was the one of the minor time, one of the small times I got like something from my parents, right? It was like, who's this Santana guy? You know, and,
Well, that's a good one to have around the house. And this is all
Yeah.
pre-internet, too. Like, we
right.
didn't have
Yeah.
easy ways to just find new music. Right?
No.
We had to-
And a lot of my like I wanted to go out looking for music because the music I was listening at home sucked.
Yeah.
So it's like there's got to be better things out there, right? So growing up as a kid, believe it or not, Beavis and Butthead were a huge outlet for me to come into find all these new bands that I hadn't heard. I used to watch that show as a kid, and it was always and I always used to record it on VHS,
Yeah.
and then I would go back and pay attention to all the video clips that they would make fun of and stuff, and this sounds cool. Like Alice in Chains is like one of my favorite bands. The first time I ever heard them was on Beavis and Butthead
Oh, really?
when they had
Nice.
the Dumb Bones video, and I was like,
Yeah.
the beginning, like when he screams and I was like,
Yeah.
it's like, what is this? Like, it's amazing. Like,
That's awesome.
the next day I was out buying the cassette, like, for that album. Like, and same with Guns N' Roses, Welcome to the Jungle.
That's a good tune.
One of the, when I first heard that song, I was like, okay, I got to hear the rest of this album. This is because I was into music before that, but I wouldn't say I was like, just like a diehard fan. It was just, music was like, oh, cool. You put that in the background, whatever. Like, but that album, that Appetite for Destruction album, I think opened up a whole, after I heard that, I was like, what am I doing throughout the day that doesn't involve going to accumulate more music? Like, I've been wasting my time. I need to spend all my money buying albums and and it was just, the addiction just began right there and then.
Well, that album was a real game changer too at the time. Like, it was so good. It was really hard and heavy, but then it was also on Much Music. It was on the radio. You could hear it elsewhere, but it was like, I remember getting that album too, and just it's such an iconic cover with the cross and the skulls on them, and Welcome to the Jungle starts with that riff.
It just felt like an eviction notice to glam rock. Like, get out of here, you're done.
Yeah.
Like, this is because I had that Sunset Strip kind of like punk rock attitude,
just dirty, and,
grimy rock and roll, and it was just like I hadn't heard anything like that prior to that. I was like,
well, and all the metal music on the radio at that time too was a lot softer. Like Bon Jovi and
you had a lot. Yeah,
Def Leppard, which I enjoy all of them, but they definitely are a lot lighter than Guns N' Roses was. And I remember when Guns N' Roses came out and just kind of kicked the door down, and then you had Motley Crue as well being played a little bit more and a little bit heavier and stuff, coming up. And it was awesome.
And then there was other albums around that time that I was loving too, like Run DMC.
Oh, that's great.
Like just a lot of old school hip hop. Like I've
Beastie Boys.
Like I've never been one to stick with one genre. Like,
it's funny with the Beastie Boys.
Like, I'm all over the place, right? Like,
the Beastie Boys' License to Ill. I just realized now at 45 years old, looking at the cover, on the tail of the thing, they have penis on there. It's written backwards.
I would have to go back and look.
But and it was just like, it was just a little article I read, and it was talking about like how juvenile Beastie Boys are. And, like, they hid this in plain sight from so many people for so long. Yeah. And I looked at it, I was like, holy shit! Like, how did I never? Especially being a boy, growing up. Like,
dude, I'm learning this now.
I always found ways to like sneak a penis in somewhere. Like, it was funny, huh?
Yeah.
And like, how did I not see that? There it is. Like, good on you, Beastie Boys.
Yeah. But I mean, the one family member I could give credit to for having any sort of influence on me for my love of music is probably my uncle, Uncle Henry. I was just kicking it at his house one time, and I went downstairs to the basement, and he had a couple of crates with records. And at that time, this was like around the same time as when I found Guns N' Roses and stuff, maybe just right before. But I remember just looking through it and finding these album covers. That just that's what got my attention. It's like, this looks cool. Like, I don't know who this is or I haven't heard it, and he was pretty cool, but he was like, yeah, take it. Like, sweet. So I'm going to take this. I still have the very first 4 records that I ever owned, which I got from Nat Crate.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, which is AC/DC Power Age, AC/DC, what was the one before Power Age? High Voltage, Nazareth, No Mean City.
Great.
And Molly Hatchet, Flirting with Disaster. No. That Molly Hatchet cover, when I saw that, I was like, this is some badass shit, right? Like, so I grabbed those and then listened to those, and that kind of got things going even more, because I was like, going from like Guns N' Roses and stuff to like a more classic rock, like
Well, those album covers sold it. And it's
They
wild
did.
that we're sitting here right now doing this podcast on the internet and having the access to everything that we have. But like when we first started listening to music, we didn't know. We didn't preview it. We didn't have anything. It was like we looked at the album cover and it was like, I go back to that Meatloaf one. It was like, that's such a cool cover.
Yeah.
And you put it on and it was 50-50.
Yeah.
Like Manowar has an amazing album cover
Manowar
on it. It's like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
You're like, haha, we got you.
Yeah.
Because that album sucks.
Don't judge the book or the album by the cover, right?
Well, yeah, but sometimes you need to.
Yeah.
And then, all those 70s bands, like the Molly Hatchet album cover was a great one. But Uriah Heep had amazing album covers. And like Sabbath had some too. And like Kiss had really good album covers. Judas Priest and like Iron Maiden building their characters like Eddie and all these characters that you kind of you grew up with them as well. So I remember going to Iron Maiden the first time and seeing when they brought Eddie on stage, and I'm like, holy shit, like this is so cool. And like having that tangible thing that you can look at is something that I feel really bad for kids now. Like they have access to more music, but I think it's harder for them to really get a feel and appreciation because it's so fast.
It's so fast. They're not even reading like the liner notes and like, you just get it notes? So right. Like like they just get it right off like a digital, like a streaming site.
And they don't even buy like an album. It's like you go on iTunes and I like that song. It's like, well, what about the other 10 songs?
Yeah.
Like, fuck.
Yeah. That was such a great like appeal to it too. I would just buy an album, run home, smoke a joint, lay in my bedroom, put on the album and just read the inside and everything, all the liner notes, like that whole like, oh, this musician plays on this song in this album. Like, holy shit. Like
some names.
And then you go buy more music and you're looking for those names. Like this, who does he play on? Like, where does he, and like, I miss that, like about buying music.
It's a visceral component that's just not there anymore. Spotify, all well and good. You got a great selection. You got rotation out the wazoo. It's everywhere, but it's not tangible. You can't put your hands on it.
Joy of discovery,
which is
right, like,
but enhances it because you can hear suggested music, and you get all this stuff thrown into your face that is directly in line with what you're actually listening to and what you like and what you typically play. But you are completely lacking that visceral handheld. And the other thing that's kind of a little bit overlooked as well is when you went out and bought that album, you listened to it. You listened to it over and over, and you listened to every song, and you really got ingrained in that music. And now you hear a song on the radio, you might play it a couple times on the radio, but it's just not the same. And you had to get invested in your music. And as a former DJ, I truly got invested in my music because that was how I earned a living at one point in time. So,
and you had to try and set yourself apart from the other guy who had a big music collection too. Like, it's like, what are you playing that he's not? That's going to make me as a bar owner be like, hey, well, I'm going to hire Colin because he has better music, or he's always got something different. He's got something new. And like Colin grew up in the Yukon, and here's just a little secret about the Yukon. It's like 10 years behind every day. So like,
you guys think your
trying to find music up there was really hard to do.
If you guys think your musical influences sucked, my mom had literally Elvis albums and nothing else. It was Elvis LPs, period. And she never played them. They literally were just in the jackets all the time. I think maybe when she's putting up the Christmas tree, she'd pull out the Elvis Christmas album and whatnot.
We listened to that a lot as a kid.
Yeah,
that album.
But it was pretty much just that. And then, I mean, you moved to the Yukon for a while. What was there for a radio station? There was CKRW AM radio. I listened, like, seriously,
60s FM was so
60s and 70s AM gold. That's what I cut my teeth on. Yeah. So when my aunt showed up one day, and I think it was like 81, 82 with a Lionel Richie album in her brand new Walkman, because I mean she lived in Toronto and she'd pick up all the latest things, and so she showed up at Christmas one year with a Walkman, brand new. We didn't know what that was, and a Lionel Richie cassette. And it was my first exposure to something that was in the current decade.
It was Lionel Richie.
But I mean
Solo Richie or Commodore's Lionel Richie?
Solo.
Solo.
Yeah.
Oh, that's no good.
So it was like, hello,
Dancing on
here's
the
Lionel
Ceiling
Richie.
was all right.
It's hello, here's Lionel Richie.
Yeah, no doubt.
And
Actually,
but
we had that album in the car.
Yeah.
Like our Saskatoon car when I was a kid was that Lionel Richie album with Dancing in the Ceiling. I think it's purple or something. It's just his goofy face there, right?
when he's lying on his side,
Oh yeah. That's what. Yeah, he's laying down on his
pale blue background, lying on his side.
Oh,
Headshot.
yeah. I know what you're talking about, yeah.
I'm
But
traumatized by
it's
it.
like having that growing up in the Yukon like that too. And another thing, so driving around in the Yukon as a teenager, Friday nights
Mhm.
was bingo. There was no music on the radio on a Friday night.
Dead bingo on the radio?
Yeah.
Bingo on the radio.
On all the radio stations, all three of them.
Why the hell would there be bingo on the
Because it's
radio?
Friday night and they did TV radio bingo.
Yeah.
And that's what it was for like 4 hours.
Oh, yeah.
And we would drive around, and if like so your car, you'd be fucked. You could only listen to bingo. That's it. You
Yeah.
would just drive around and listen to bingo.
That's
So
crazy,
usually you
yeah.
would find somebody else that had the ability to play a cassette tape, and then like everybody would try and pile into their car for a couple hours because bingo was on. That was our Friday nights growing up in the Yukon.
That
It's,
sounds rough, man.
Or
That
you
sounds
do
rough.
what Adam did and find a friend who's a couple years older and had a big thumping stereo and
Yeah.
and was
and
able to
make
play
them
everything.
not play dance music and play like, the three rock things he had in there.
Yeah,
Between you and Dave Kinney.
yeah.
Dave Kinney had a kick-ass stereo as well, but he had some pretty shitty music. And it was like, dude, can't we just listen to some rock or something?
Yeah.
Girls like this. And like, in case you haven't noticed, there's no girls in the car. You know? So,
Yeah.
You had long hair.
Hey,
It could be confusing.
that long hair got the girls in the car. And then I had to listen to dance music.
Yeah.
Horrible.
There's worse things.
But yeah, like what you were saying about the digital thing, that is the upside to it is you can listen to an album before you go spend money on it and find out it's shit.
Mhm.
That's
That was part of the fun, too.
it was. But if
Really
you
love
if
being
if
a
you were
roulette.
if you didn't have the money at all times, it's like, well, I'm buying this album, it better be good, you know. And yeah, it's like I'll listen to an album now on Spotify or so, and if I really like it, like the whole thing, I'll go buy it right away, right? But if there's like one or two songs I like, I'll just grab those two songs and
throw them in your little
throw them in my
playlist.
thing and not go spend the money on the entire album,
But-
right? But
That's one of the things that's great about music is that what suits your flavor isn't necessarily going to be suiting everybody else's flavor.
True,
So
yeah.
I know one of the things that we did as kids was we traded our tape collection and eventually our CD collection.
yeah.
We it was commodity trading, right?
Yeah.
So if it wasn't your cup of tea, it was going to be somebody else's, and eventually you get something that was adding to your collection as opposed to, oh crap, why do I have this thing
Oh,
collecting
man.
dust?
Tapes were everything back then. Like I record tapes, trade them with buddies. You liked a girl, you made a tape for her, and it was that was the way to. You know,
I
when
used
you're
to
in high
mail.
school, yeah.
Mail mixtapes to other people across like all of North America, and they would send me a tape back.
Really, I never went that far.
Yeah, it was like in the back of like I remember Hit Parader magazine had these ads in there for
Hit
like
Parader.
tape trading and stuff too, and it was like you'd send Hit Parader a letter saying I'm looking for this type of music and I have this, and then they would print that,
Yeah,
and then somebody else would see it and be like, oh okay, I have what he's looking for, so I'm going to send him that,
yeah.
and then he would write a letter like, hey, here's Judas Priest, can you send me like Journey? And you're like, yeah. So you get your album, you're like, cool. And then you record that and you send that off to them. I used to do that like all the time. And it's such a weird, like when you think about it now, like such a wild concept of like just making a tape of random shit and sending it to somebody you don't know and hoping that they're going to send you something back.
Yeah.
And I found like more often than not, everybody did. Like it was really cool.
Yeah.
But at a young age, I really loved making like mixed tapes for people, and it started with cassettes and then CDs and stuff like that. Your box, that I love doing that. Love doing that.
It was just such a great feeling when you made a tape for somebody and it was new to them
Yeah.
and they appreciate it and you're like, holy shit,
it's
what is
like-
this? You're like, it's like, yeah, like I got them. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, yeah, it's to this day, even now, like if I introduce somebody to a band and they love it, it's like,
Well, how often do you and I still send each other links back and
oh
forth?
yeah, all the
You
time.
know,
Oh
like,
yeah.
you hear something on Spotify, you're like, fuck, I'm just going to listen to this.
Yeah.
And I'm the same thing. I use YouTube as my Spotify.
Yeah.
I find a lot of my new stuff on there.
Yeah.
But the same thing, I hear something and it's like, you got to hear this. And
Yeah. For sure.
So out of curiosity, do you guys remember the days of filling in the Columbia House listings
yeah.
and getting
Oh,
your
I still-
I think I still owe
$14
$14 or something. Man, that envelope was the greatest thing that could come in the mail back then. Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
it was like, yeah,
36 CDs for $1 that you don't even
Yeah.
have to pay them.
yeah.
Like, oh, yeah.
It was, yeah.
The absolute first 100 CDs in my music collection definitely came from Columbia House. Like, I'd sign up all sorts of names. I remember I lived in this apartment building and it had the names on everybody's mailbox.
Yeah.
And I would
Nice.
go and take that person's first name and that person's last name and fill out Columbia House. And
Never
send it
thought
to
of that.
them.
That's a, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good
And
idea.
then our mailboxes weren't big enough for the Columbia House package.
Yeah.
So I would put in somebody else's address and then just make sure I was there when the mail came and then just grab it.
That's
And
hilarious.
take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty, they can't arrest us now, can they?
I don't know if Columbia House is even an entity, but
know.
I don't think
I'm
it
sure
is,
somebody owns something somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Kids don't steal music. It's not right.
Never-
If you're
never-
going to do it.
oh god.
That was the way to do it.
Okay, so no, because in between now and then we have Napster. I mean, let's not forget that particular
Yeah.
Lars
Napster
Ulrich.
was great at finding new music and giving your computer aids.
Yeah.
Napster wasn't actually that bad for that. LimeWire.
LimeWire.
Was the AIDS giver. That was it was like syphilis for your computer. It just kept getting-
LimeWire was that chick at the bar missing one tooth. That was been sending you drinks all night and everybody else is gone. You're like, well, all right. I guess this is it. Let's go.
Having worked in the same bar as Adam, I can vouch for him.
Yeah, he knows the girl I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. That is hilarious.
But yeah, like we were saying, there's, other than my uncle letting me go through the crates, and not really much came from my family when it comes to music. It was just mostly, being in school, being around other people, other buddies who were like,
people or somebody else's older brother.
yeah, it never really came from home. I hear a lot of that from buddies who are like, oh yeah, my grandma put me into this, or my mom. I'm kind of jealous because it's like, I was telling my dad about Pink Floyd. And it shouldn't have been that way.
Yeah,
it should have been the other way around. And that's when I knew, okay, I'm not getting anything out of this household.
Priorities as well, right? I mean, he was probably more worried about putting food on the table than
True. Yeah. But I mean, to my dad and my mom, music was just something you put on in the background. It wasn't to listen to, but it wasn't. They didn't get excited about certain
our
things.
family was like that a little bit too. It was mostly background music, but
Yeah.
it seemed like it was always on. We always had something on. If we went on a car ride, there was music went on. We had the radio on or we had the cassettes in all the time.
Yeah.
My mom listened, especially around Christmas time. She listened to a lot. It's we had that same Elvis Christmas album, and I hate it because I'm not an Elvis fan. I didn't like it. But she also listened to Boney M Christmas
Oh,
album,
that was a fantastic
which is the
one.
best Christmas album that's ever been done. Nothing has topped that. It's just
Unless you're a mall and
solid
it's
all the way
Mariah
through.
Carey.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But having all this music always on, we had CMT on the TV in the background when they played country music videos, not Reba TV show and stuff, and Much Music that was on a lot. I remember I got home from school and I'd watch the Power Hour, and that's where I got all my metal from.
Yeah.
And they would play
With Erica M.
Erica M.
That was
one of my first crushes.
See, that was
you hot.
That was right before, because I would go run home and watch Power 30. I think Power 30 was after.
Now here's a dynamic that we got to kind of
Teresa Roncon.
Yeah.
Teresa,
So Colin's 3 years older than I am.
Yeah.
And I'm about 3 years older than you are. So we have very
It's generational.
close ages, but also the age gap is just enough. I had the Power Hour, but you had the Power 30.
Right.
It was
And I remember watching when Video Killed the Radio Star when it first launched.
that was the very first video on MTV. Was Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles or Bugles.
Buggles.
I call them the Buggles. Yeah, that's
Buggles.
Yeah. We were just listening to that in the car today.
Yeah.
Gabby was dancing away in the background. Makes me happy and now I get to pass on that music shit to my kid.
Yeah.
And we drive around and listen to music and have a good time and stuff. And it's
the whole 80s hair metal scene. I came in at the end of that.
Yeah.
I came in around the Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction when it was just kind of getting into that, right? So and
rock.
yeah, so anything before that, I had to go back and check it out, right? Because I wasn't really there for when Poison and stuff when they were in their prime just coming out. That was before my time.
That stuff was awesome. Like I loved all that shit. But at like, at that time, it's funny. I was talking to somebody else. Like, I can't believe you like Poison and Def Leppard. Like, there's so much better music, and they talked about Guns N' Roses and modern stuff. And I was like, well, you're right. But when Poison and Def Leppard were popular, Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue weren't.
Right.
So it's not that I chose Poison over Guns N' Roses.
It's what was
I
there.
didn't have Guns N' Roses yet.
And you
right?
don't have to start disliking something because you like something else.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And like,
There's a room for more.
yeah,
Show the
like,
love.
I love Poison and I love Slayer. And the two of them will never be on the same bill.
That would be great.
But I like both of them. I would go to that show. I'd feel bad for Poison, though, because I don't know if they would be able to deal with the Slayer fans. And I feel bad for that front row of Poison fans that would not be able to deal with the Slayer fans. Like,
I know,
there'd be a lot of hurt feelings.
Some of the most sedate music fans are metal fans, though. I mean, it's strangely enough, but I mean, like the most respectful concerts you'll ever go to are typically metal.
And metal fans, it's definitely a family and a community, and we all care about each other and look out for each other. And like I've said this numerous times, I've been to at least 100 metal shows in my life, and I have never once seen a fight, like a full-on fist fight happen. I've been to like 8 country shows, and I've seen 13 fights.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you get these cowboy wannabes get all liquored up, and then they start scrapping and shit. And it's like, are you mad at each other, or are you just mad because the music sucks? Like, go to a metal show. It just doesn't happen. And my wife talks about the pit. She's so scared of it. She's like, it's so mean and it's so violent. It's like, but it's not. Because if somebody falls down, everybody stops and they pick that person up and they make sure they're okay. And then they carry on. And there's some rules in it, and I get looking at it from the outside how scary it can be, but it's really not that bad when you're in it. You just get bounced around a lot. As long as you keep your elbows down, you're good to go,
Yeah.
Sometimes you get a headbutt, it happens. But if you get hurt or you fall down, everybody makes sure you're okay. You don't see that at a country show. No. Nobody gives a fuck about anybody else. The metal fans are like that.
Pretty generalizing. I would say it's probably not quite as bad as you're painting the picture. I mean, certainly you see. I think the biggest thing
before the Georgia line, somebody's getting punched.
By you, or
well, probably just because I'm mad. I'm at fucking Florida Georgia line. Like, what am I doing here?
That's true.
I have to be pretty drunk.
See, like the metal, that hair metal scene, like that's one thing I was never really a big fan of. I do like some, like, pick and choose here and there, but as far as like, because I came in at the end, and I was always at that time I was more into punk rock than into the hair metal thing, and like,
but you're on the doorstep.
Oh yeah,
you're on the doorstep to
grunge. Yeah. So like for the 80s to me was punk, right? Punk and thrash, but that era where hair metal was just owning everything. Yeah. At that time, I was into punk. Like I didn't, like. I mean, me being a dumb teenager, I was like, who are these guys who look like women doing these sappy love songs? Like, get the fuck out of here with this,
he's
right?
He's talking about you there, Adam.
Who's hotter, Poison or Vixen?
Yeah, right? And
I'd fuck them both.
And I mean, and I respect that whole scene because, it was a time and it was, I mean, it still fits in part of the whole music.
I had
thing, right?
long hair. I had other pants. I had a pair of I called my Steven Tyler pants. They had like rips on them and bandanas tied down the side. And I think back and I'm like, oh my God, right? But like at the time, it was cool. And especially bringing that from Saskatoon up to Whitehorse was very... very different.
He was years ahead of the curve. It was pretty crazy.
I think it's one of those things. If you were not there in it to appreciate it, going to see those bands live, buying those albums when they were coming out, I totally get why somebody's whole thing. But
and it was going through the 80s. There have been several births of genres of music, several. And certainly the 80s was a very iconic period. 70s was also very iconic. 60s was very iconic. I mean, every decade's got their big iconic bits. I think we're getting a little bit more homogenous now. I think it's not quite as... I mean, when you look at the 90s and the birth of thrash, the 80s with the hair... thrash, sorry, look at birth of grunge. You go through the 80s and you got all the hair metal bands. And pick the decade. There is something like that.
Oh, absolutely.
What is the 2000s? What is the teens?
Well, the 2000s, I think we were discussing this. It would be like new metal.
The aughts.
Like Linkin Park and who are those other fucking shitty guys? Limp Bizkit,
Oh yeah.
stuff like that, like
Yeah.
those bands, and you know, Stained, and like this kind of alternative. So it wasn't quite grunge, it wasn't rock anymore, it wasn't, there was like a mixture in there that was weird, like Live and Collective Soul, and those bands had their own little like subgenre.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the new metal bands had their thing, and I remember everybody talking about like, oh, this is like such a brand new style of music. It's all amazing. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, what is it? And like listening to it, and it's like rock and rap together. It was like, oh, this is new. Like clearly you haven't heard of Aerosmith and Run DMC.
Yeah.
And then even before then, how about all the rap guys in the '70s that were sampling rock tracks in the background? Like, putting rock and rap together is not
It's not new,
fucking new, and there's a million people that did it better than Linkin fucking Park did. That's for
Fucking
sure.
that was Rick Rubin's bread and butter.
Yeah,
Like back in the day, that was his.
But
yeah.
like, it's nothing's ever new.
No.
And I think, and that's the early 2000s, and then
So-
we have 2010
Would
be
the aughts,
indie rock again.
but would the aughts and the teens maybe be more in line with music that is not maybe your cup of tea? Like, would it be more
Yeah.
in line with the dance and the techno and all
It
those
would
things,
fit
as
in
well
with
as the
them,
rap
right?
and everything
Like-
else, where those were having the boom at that
Yeah.
point in time?
Well, and those influences there for sure. And even when like anybody who was like an early teen in the 2000s and 2010s, like much like we were in the 80s and 90s in our music,
Mhm.
then they have like their punk was Green Day and Good
Yeah.
Charlotte and some of those bands, and
Yeah,
we listen to that as like, well, this isn't punk. Like, we know Black Flag and the Misfits and the Dead Kennedys and
Yeah.
the Ramones and stuff, and like that's, well, even the Ramones was like older than we were, but like
Yeah.
that's punk music.
Yeah.
But to these kids, Green Day is their punk, and Good Charlotte is their punk, and Pete Wentz's shitty band is like, that's their punk music. And I think as we get older and our tastes sort of stay there, it's hard to kind of like that. Although there are some Green Day songs I enjoy, I don't mind some of them. I would never call them a punk band, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, even any genre that I don't like or not a fan of, I can find songs I like in it. Like, it's not, I mean, dubstep is probably the only genre where I hate everything in it.
Really?
Yeah.
It's pretty rough.
Because that just doesn't, it makes my ears bleed. But literally anything else, well, except maybe like boy bands, that shit. But like,
You don't want it this way?
no, I don't want it that way.
What about that way?
Not that way either.
Not that way
No,
either? All right.
no.
Anyway?
And
Any way you want it?
anyway, I want it. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah. But
Bonus points to anybody who got any of those references.
I'm
but
just sitting here surprised that either one of you got those references. That's the funniest part to me.
like the
We said them.
I know
the
that.
2000s, I find the 2000s to me was all about electronic music.
Yeah.
That was the big,
Even The Rock got a lot of electronic.
because they were starting to use the
Rob Zombie.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
music, but a lot of electronics in it. Disturbed, really good metal, but they had a
Yeah.
lot of synth in it
Yeah.
as well. There's like,
as far as rock for the 2000s, it was like new metal. That was just, I mean, that was the big, like when I think 2000s, I think new metal and EDM.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the two, right? And like Papa Roach and Limp Bizkit, like all that garbage.
now would you put like Disturbed in with Linkin Park?
Man, I don't know, because
because it's a different style of
It
music,
is.
but they were there at the same time.
sometimes I think I know what new metal is, and then somebody's like, this album is new metal, and I'm like, dude, that's Sepultura. Like, no, but this album, what was that album with Roots, Bloody Roots, that had that song in it?
I think that one
Roots. It's called Roots. To a lot of people, that's considered a new metal album, but I'm like, dude, that's Sepultura. That's thrash royalty.
Yeah.
But then I listened to that specific album, and there's a few. I'm like, okay, I can kind of see why. I hate that album is called new metal. Like, it drives me nuts. But I'm
There were
also
some
just
songs on there that definitely fit in that
right,
style.
and it's like, okay, I don't know, like,
I remember the first time I heard Sepultura, it was too much for me at that time. I
Yeah.
was just like, I don't like the growly vocals. And
Yeah.
it's like, I like the music, but I'm like,
Yeah.
not for me. And it was like a couple of years later, I was drinking with my buddy Jeremy, and he really likes him. And he actually was playing Max Cavalera for me.
yeah,
And it was like, fuck, this is awesome. He was like, yeah, this is the guy that used to sing with Sepultura. And I was like, what? And it was like, did a bit more singing on those albums.
yeah,
And then it was like, okay, so I started going back into it, and he gave me one of the Sepultura albums. I can't remember which one it was, but he had doubles of it, so he gave it to me. And I went back home, and I kind of gave it a different listen with a different set of ears.
Which album was it? Do you remember? Oh,
no, I can't.
But it was like an early one.
Yeah, it was an early.
I love those old early Sepultura albums.
It was definitely one of the ones that I would have heard before, and been like, this isn't my. And even now, still, a lot of the screamo metal and like that death metal and the growly I don't like the growly vocals, but I love the music, the drums. Yeah. Like the double kick on the drums and the triple kick some of these guys are doing, and that heavy chugging guitars. I love all that beat.
Yeah.
But growing up in the 80s, having like amazing vocalists, I wish they would sing. And Avenged Sevenfold was really good at, they started out with a lot of that growly stuff, and then somebody figured out M Shadows can actually fucking sing. And he was like, this hurts my throat. So he started like singing more, and then I really like, Avenged. And some of my friends that are fans of them, they're like, oh no, their first stuff is way better than this other shit. And they went corporate. I was like, yeah, but this stuff's way better and easier to listen to than the other stuff. It's like, what do you do with it?
Yeah, that kept me away from bands like War and Rammstein. I mean, not that I don't like some of the songs from them, but on a whole, I find it not as nice to listen to.
Like War.
Or Rammstein. I love both those bars. Man, if those two bands could tour together, that'd be my childhood. Like, oh man!
Like I said, there's songs that I
enjoy.
The
party with Rammstein for sure.
Were you?
Yeah.
There's songs that I like from both.
Yeah,
there's literally something from everybody's catalog that I like. There are very, very few.
Celine Dion.
There's stuff that I like from Celine Dion. I'm not going to mention anything about Coldplay because we've already covered that particular one with you. But but I can literally find something in everybody's repertoire that I find enjoyable.
That's a great way to look at it. Like it's like the way I look at music is the same way I look at food. Why would you eat the same food every day when there's so much out there? And if you did eat the same food every day, you would hate that food. Like
he doesn't. Adam does eat the same food all the time.
Adam, I believe that.
Cheeseburgers like the Metallica of food.
Like I couldn't.
I hope they don't listen to this. Like, did he just call it fucking cheeseburger?
You could use steak, but you use cheeseburger.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. Amazing.
But like, there's not a genre or a band that I love enough that I could listen to them every day, because I would hate that band really quick. I need that variety.
What I find as I get older, I definitely get a lot more accepting of other stuff, and I changed the way I listen to music now. There's lots of times my wife, she finds it strange that I can go lay on the bed, put my headphones on, and just listen to music for like 3 hours and do nothing else, just listen.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes I'll listen to the same song like 4 or 5 times in a row because I'm listening to different parts of it.
I do that too.
Right now I'm listening to the drums and trying to focus on just the drums and hear these cool little beats. And then I'll listen to it again because like, while that, I heard a little guitar part. I'm like, oh, I never heard that before.
Yeah.
And like experiencing these songs like new again and over again, but also going back to bands that I've written off, because when I was younger, I was so stuck in my ways and so opinionated about shit. And now that I've gotten older, I was like, I wasted so much time being mad at dumb bands that actually turned out to be really good. But I think our musical tastes change and grow as we age as well.
Yeah.
That helped. Like I said with the Sepultura, the first time I listened to it, I didn't like it. And then I listened to it later on. I was like, oh. Same thing with Slayer. Like I listened to Slayer a lot when I was like younger because all my other buddies did too. But it was like, this is just too much for me. Like,
I mean,
but now going to a Slayer show with you is like one of my favorite things to fucking do.
Music,
like,
certain music hits at you at certain times in your life where you just clicks.
Yeah,
where you get it. If I could go back and slap 16-year-old me in the head, I would, because I was so close-minded with like, it was like things that were on the radio. I was like, I don't want this commercial bullshit. I want that, like,
But sometimes the commercial bullshit song's not that
bad. And having that mentality prevented me from enjoying bands that were good back then, where I went back and heard them and I was like, why didn't I like this before? Like, why was I so stubborn that these guys were like getting all this mainstream airplay and I just assumed they were shit because they weren't some like hardcore underground, like I wanted all my metal to sound like Kill 'Em All, just that unpolished, sounded like it was recorded in a shitty dive bar in a basement of somewhere, like, and if it, and it was just a dumb way to look at it. But as I got older, all the stuff I used to like, I still like, but it just expands to more.
But
Right.
part of the fun that you're not really thinking about is when you're 16 years old, you're fresh into puberty. You're experiencing a whole bunch of things new for the first time.
Yeah.
You're seeking your identity, and the things that aren't necessarily part of that identity become irrelevant. And
That's a good way to
you try to surround yourself with the things that provide that identity and give you that feedback to let you know that what you're doing is validated. And anything that doesn't validate that is garbage. And it instantly gets thrown away.
That's a great way to put it. Like you couldn't have forced me to listen to Bruce Springsteen when I was a teenager. And I'm 43 years old now. And I think I was about 30 when I actually started.
Error on your screen.
Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah. And it was one of those artists where you learn to appreciate him when you're older. Right. Yeah. And a lot of times, like I've always told, something I always told Adam, like, I think you should judge when somebody hits puberty by when they appreciate Bruce Springsteen. That's when you're an adult.
That's when you're an adult.
Before that, you don't know shit.
Right? I'm not sure I've hit puberty yet.
Yeah. The other day, not the other day, but a while back, Adam texted me, this was maybe a year ago or so. I remembered he was like, I really am really appreciating Springsteen's songwriting. And so I was like, congrats, you just hit puberty. It's your,
I haven't gone back to revisit.
But see, I always liked some Bruce Springsteen stuff when I was younger.
Did you?
I liked Born in the USA.
Yeah.
I liked Glory Days is one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
There's another Fire song that he does. I'm on Fire, maybe it's called.
Oh, yeah.
But that same album.
Yeah.
And like the Born in the USA album was huge when I was younger at that age. So I liked that album. And then I got his next one, and it just it wasn't for me.
Absolutely.
But now that I'm older, I would love to go to a Springsteen concert because I've seen enough clips of it online and seen those things. It's such a good show, and he's he puts everything into it. He comes out for 3 hours, and he doesn't do a lot of shows.
Yeah,
but that's why, because when he does a show, he's out there for 3 hours. He's giving everything and going hard on it.
Yeah,
and it's appreciating shows differently now. Like when I was younger, I was always in the pit, right? And you got to be involved in that and slamming around and having all this fun. And think about when you and I go to Slayer, we still go up to the front, but we go on the outside. We don't get in the pit because it's I'm too old to get banged around, but I want to be close. And we don't do a whole lot of headbanging. I find you and I both just listen. Mm-hmm. I remember when we were at Testament, Exodus was playing. And I remember looking over at Rob, and he's standing there, and he's just got this fucking grin on his face, and he's watching it. And I was really happy because I'm with my buddy, and Exodus is right there. And that's when Gary Holt was on our side of the stage.
Oh, was this at just recently?
Yeah, when we were at Testament there. Yeah. And I'm fucking Gary Holt's right there.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. And it was just, and the look on your face, you were just and it was and I think I probably looked at you the way you were looking at Exodus, and just being able to share music and have somebody that appreciates it like I do. We don't spend the whole concert talking. We do it in the lineup, and we always get people laughing and listening and joining in, which is why we're doing this podcast in the first place, is based on those type things. But when we go to a show, we can just sit there and watch and experience the music and just listen to the music. And
that's my happy place, man.
Yeah. And we both have the same feeling. So it's it's.
And I mean, especially with all the COVID restrictions, to be back to seeing live music again, that is just, it was just awesome.
And how good is Testament? They're fucking deadly.
They're on the list. I haven't seen them yet.
You haven't seen them yet?
No, and I'm pretty sure I got you in.
Mount Rushmore of thrash to me.
No, I had that way before I came to Whitehorse. I listened to Testament.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I introduced a lot of people up there to Testament.
Yeah.
Testament was one of the early metal bands that I was a fan of when I was young. That was one of the, to me, if I'm doing a Mount Rushmore of thrash, they're in there. They should be in,
I think the big four, they should remove Anthrax and put in Testament.
Yes.
That's my personal feeling on that. Because I think Anthrax is really good at what they do.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would call what they do
in the same
thrash in the same line of early Metallica and Slayer and even Megadeth. They just don't fit in.
And I think
they're there because they were huge then too.
And I'd probably remove Megadeth and put Overkill in there. Personally.
Yeah.
And I'm
okay with Megadeth.
Yeah.
There, even though I'm not a huge Megadeth fan, but I'm okay with them being in there because of the longevity and how they were big at that time as well.
Yeah.
And what they brought.
And I wouldn't say anybody's wrong by putting them there. Like, I love their old stuff and everything, but just certain bands I prefer more.
Would you consider throwing Pantera in there?
For thrash? I mean, no. But for metal,
yeah,
maybe.
I don't know if Pantera is thrash.
I don't know if I would consider them.
They're definitely heavy metal.
Heavy, yeah. As far as like metal, like they are up there. But specifically for thrash, I don't think I would.
Well, I mean, if you're going to look at it from that point of view, you kind of have to reclassify Metallica because they started thrash. They kind of evolved into something else.
Yeah, but
they've kind of gone back to thrash. I mean, it's so you can't really classify based on
But
where did they start?
I know what you're saying. That's a good point.
I mean, Cowboys from Hell was a pretty good thrashing song.
It was. You know what? That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Like I mean,
it's just amazing that like the same band that did Kill 'Em All also did Reload.
Oh man!
Right? Like it's.
Up until now, I had forgotten Reload existed until you just brought it back into my brain.
It's a different time frame, and I think Load and Reload were good for that time frame, and Metallica kept themselves relevant because of that, and they gained a lot of newer fans that found old Metallica as well. And same thing with people. They kind of give shit to that Stranger Things show and be like, like I saw somebody post online. It was like, "Hey Metallica, how does it feel to know like you have like fake fans because of a TV show?" And James Hetfield replied back to that saying like, "It doesn't matter how they found their first Metallica song, because if they like Puppets, there's a good chance they're gonna like a whole bunch of other shit."
And
so like if a TV show for teenagers introduce them to that,
it's an entry point.
And just remember, at some point in your life, you hadn't heard of Metallica song either.
This whole this whole bandwagon label from when you got into something. Like, who cares when you got into or how?
I read an article today. It was specifically about people in metal and how metal fans are very, very territorial and gatekeeping is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Where you didn't like this then, well then you suck. And how come you like them now? And getting pissed off. It's like that one girl wearing a Nirvana shirt that you ran across, right?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody who's obviously a fan was like, "Why are you wearing that? Can you even name 3 songs?"
And then she named a whole bunch of them, put them in his place, and it made me so happy because there are a lot of kids that do wear band shirts that they don't necessarily know of, but even with that, it's like, okay, if you don't know of them, just go listen to them.
And but who cares? It could just be that they like the picture.
Or like a cool picture.
Imagine getting mad at that. Like,
but that's the gatekeeping. It's just show off. And
it's like a defensiveness, right? So, but it's like a defensiveness because it's what they like and they appreciate, and somebody else who they feel potentially, I'm not in their shoes, but potentially somebody who feels that that you wearing a shirt for a band that you don't necessarily know is offensive because this is my identity, and now you're watering my identity down. So fuck you, right?
Yeah.
And I think that part of the gatekeeping aspect is the toxic nature of it. But welcome to tribalism and all the rest of those types of things where people need to feel some form of validation about themselves and then push that upon other people. Much like 16-year-old boys who are into metal and fuck the rest of you guys because you're not into what I'm listening to.
Well, it's not my fault you were wrong about music.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah.
But even some of that, like all that dance stuff, and like I don't know all the names because I didn't like it, I didn't listen to it, but I do know a couple. And like we were talking last time about it, like 2 Unlimited. For some reason, I like them. I don't know why, but it just.
You like 2 Unlimited?
Not all of it, but there's a couple tunes that I'm like, yeah, all right, that's kind of catchy. I don't mind that one. Yeah. But it's not. I couldn't listen to an album of dance music, and I think that's very different. Dance music is specifically that. You go to a bar and the DJ puts it on and people dance to it, but I don't picture too many people sitting at home rocking an entire 2 Unlimited album.
Been there.
You know what I mean? Like, well, yeah, but you're weird.
But I was DJing all of it, and I had to know.
Well, you had to listen to it to know all the songs.
I had to know what was going to be
good.
So
that wasn't putting it on to just enjoy the album. You were working. You were doing research for your job.
Sort of. I mean, I like I said, I find something enjoyable.
Did you
pretty much
vacuum to 2 Unlimited? dance music and shit. Like, you know, do your chores.
Can't really say I did that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I mean.
So you're
There's no
talking
music
about
for that.
you're talking about just being at home and enjoying like a dance album, like from front to back.
Yeah, who the fuck does that?
I do.
Been there, done that.
Like
It's
dance music?
it's an album. It's an album of music like any other genre. Like I don't like Two Unlimited, and I don't like a lot of that '90s jock jams shit. Right? Like
The jock jams was usually like
I
Crazy Train.
I didn't really like that, but I do like a lot of like the late '90s into 2000s.
But like Much
like
Dance '94 and Much Dance
See, I
'96 and
was-
all those, they were super popular.
super
Like,
popular.
super
absolutely.
popular.
I was never a fan, but they were super for dance music. Like for electronic music, I was more into like the Chemical Brothers,
Yeah.
you know, Crystal Method.
Okay,
That
so
was
you're
the kind of
definitely
stuff
more
that got me into, you know.
Yeah.
See, I think
Yeah.
the Chemical Brothers are a little more advanced musically than, you know, Two Unlimited.
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
any of
Yeah,
those. You got to
it's-
help me out with some of these other band names because they're the only
Yeah.
ones I can think of. But like
Yeah.
those type bands where it's like strictly electronic
Yeah.
and like a few words thrown in here and there. The Chemical
Yeah.
Brothers, I think, like they played songs.
Well,
You know, and, like,
Yeah.
and they definitely had a very electronic background and feel to them and stuff.
Yeah.
But they also
Yeah.
like had lyrics and shit. That,
Yeah. You know, to this day, and don't scream too hard at me, but to this day, one of the best concerts I ever went to was Black Eyed Peas.
Black Eyed Peas, really?
I
Oh,
can
yeah.
see that.
They were phenomenal.
Was this was this when they were good before they added what's her name?
Fergie.
Fergie was in it from the get-go.
What's that?
She was in it from the get-go.
Not from the get go, no.
Fergie?
First two albums they didn't have her when they were making hip hop,
Oh,
hip hop, and then she came in. What was that album where they blew up and got really?
yeah, I only got into them when they blew up.
Oh,
So,
okay, yeah. See, I
And
didn't.
then I saw them in concert when T-Pain opened for them, and it was probably about 3 or 4 years before they
Yeah.
shut down.
Yeah.
And they were totally on their game at that point.
Not a fan of them, like from the point where she got on, but I could see their shows having a lot of energy and just like, you know,
It was a show.
Yeah,
Like, it was
they
a
make it
show.
yeah, I could see that
It was
because
scripted. It was costumed. It was like it was almost like stepping into a music video that lasted for a good solid hour and a half.
it's some bands and artists they're like visual artists. If you're not experiencing them live with the choreography and it's like, you know, like for example, in the early '90s, like MC Hammer,
Yeah.
you hear an MC Hammer tape and it's whatever.
Yeah.
But if you see Hammer with the dancers and putting on the show, the big pants, it makes you appreciate more of what he's doing than if you just heard him on a cassette, right? Like it's
Yeah, there's definitely certain bands that are more suited to like having a show. And like,
yeah.
I'm a huge Kiss fan. Everybody
Yeah.
knows how much I
Mhm.
Kiss is a mediocre band, right?
But if you see them
But
live,
when you go see them live and they're blowing shit
Yeah,
up, and breathing
yeah,
fire and
exactly.
blood, and like Paul Stanley's flying across the arena and Ace Frehley shooting shit out of his guitar.
oh yeah,
It kind of covers up that fact, and they give you like a whole entire show
Yeah.
and an atmosphere to be a part of.
yeah,
And I think it's because they know that their songs are okay, but they're just okay. There
Yeah.
isn't a single Kiss song,
yeah.
and I'm a huge fan, and there isn't a single Kiss song where I'd be like, that is a great tune.
Which is hilarious
It's
because
just,
instrumentally they were not bad,
no.
and vocally, I mean, come on, like
And Paul Stanley's got an amazing voice.
absolutely. So it boggles my mind that you sit there and say like musically they weren't that great because technically
were,
all
yeah.
the pieces were there for really good
But
music.
they were really smart at playing. Like all of their songs can go on the radio.
Mhm.
All of their songs, you could put a Kiss album on at a party
Mhm.
and let it play, and there's probably not going to be any complaints.
Yeah.
You know, like if it's just on in the background, everybody's visiting.
You're probably-
there's probably no complaints
Yeah.
about their album, right? Like but there's nobody also going to be at that same party and stop and go, "Wow, what was that?"
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like
I remember being at a party when
I love
when
them because they're simple.
I remember being at a party when Razor's Edge came out, AC/DC.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that was
That's a good album.
that was a fantastic album, and right from song one, like as soon as Thunderstruck came on, it was like, what in the hell am I
What
hearing?
a way to open
Oh
an album.
What an opening song.
with
Yeah.
Thunderstruck, yeah.
yeah, I remember that to this day. I was in grade 11, so I mean that helped. That was basically your formative years of your music tastes, right? Smack dab at 16 years old. Man,
I remember
was-
me and
that
my
was the
buddy
time.
playing guitar and learning how to play Thunderstruck by like watching the video and sounding it out. And in the video, Angus plays with his one hand up in the air. Like his picking hand is up in the air and he's just hammering on with his left hand. So that's how we learned how to play it.
Yeah.
I learned how to play Thunderstruck one-handed. And then I went to see AC/DC in concert.
He doesn't do that.
And I was very close. And Angus Young picked it.
Yeah.
He used both hands.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? And then for a minute, I was like, wait a minute. Am I a better guitar player than Angus Young? And I quite quickly realized that no, I'm not. For like 3 bars, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that if Angus wanted to play it one-handed, he probably could.
Yeah.
But it was just that thing where it's like we watched the video, so I didn't know any better, and I didn't know the ins and outs of like music recording, where they do different things. And so like I watched the video, that's how I learned it. And in the video, he plays one-handed, so I just assumed that was a one-handed song. Same thing. There's an old surf song called Wipeout that has got a really cool riff to it, and I learned how to play that exactly how it's played. However, when they recorded it, their guitar player can't do that, so they recorded it slow and then sped it up. So I learned the sped up version of it.
Yeah.
And it was like, but that's not how it was recorded because he couldn't play that.
That's hilarious.
So I am better than the guitar player for the Safaris. Maybe not Angus Young.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that Thunderstruck was quite an opener, man. It's right up there with Welcome to the Jungle as like amazing opening tracks. Or the best one by far is Black Sabbath.
Albums too. Like Welcome to the Jungle had just banger after banger after banger.
Yeah.
The entire album is good.
Yeah.
And Razor's Edge was the same thing.
Yeah.
Every fucking song on that album is good.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Black Sabbath, though.
Different bands have that.
Debut album, Black Sabbath, the greatest opening song on an album ever.
Which one does it open with again? Refresh.
Black Sabbath.
Oh yeah.
The song, like it just set the tone for that band. Not just the album, but everything that would come. Like it was like, this is what we are, just dark. Like it was, yeah. I remember being stoned as hell and listening to that song for the first time, and I was like, what is like? And from that moment on, they were my favorite metal band of all time. It was just like,
you know, I didn't know about Sabbath until I was into Ozzy. And then reading in White Magazine about Black Sabbath, and it was like
Hit Parader. That's where I read about them. Yeah, and then I went and heard that album with that.
Well, again, this is like pre-internet, so it's not like I could read this article and just like Google them or YouTube, nothing like that. I was like, so now I had to go find somebody who had a Black Sabbath album, and I think it's my buddy Troy's older brother. Yeah, and like he had a Sabbath album. I was like, okay, go and listen to it that way, and they're like, oh wow, and even going to the record store to try and find it, like there wasn't any.
Yeah. So you don't have an older sibling?
No, I'm the oldest.
Oh, you're the oldest, and you?
Yeah. I'm the oldest as well. Yeah,
and I've got an older brother, so. I actually did have an older brother who did get into a lot of things. He was exposed to those things, and I got the hand-me-downs.
Oh, so man, I'm jealous of people like you.
He's where I got into AC/DC. He's where I got into Kiss. He's where I got into a whole bunch of. I mean, I never would have heard Tesla if not for my brother. He was very definitely. I mean, he had a typical '80s long hair, listening to metal music and everything else, right? Yeah. So it was, he definitely brought a lot of that in.
A lot of people were lucky if they were in that situation, whether it was a parent or older sibling, that somebody just to like guide them and like check this out. For me it was just friends, it was just buddies that would do that, right? Like, hey, I made this mixtape, here, take it, listen to this. Okay, well, and then you give them one back, okay, check out this and this, and it would just
But I have going back, I had 2 uncles, and my uncle Sean is quite a bit older, and my uncle Jody is younger. So Uncle Sean was very more country leaning and Elvis leaning. Like he loves Elvis, he loves country. So I get a lot of that from him. But when I was rebelling, me and him didn't get along musically for a long time because of that. And then my Uncle Jody had more rock stuff, and like I said earlier, with Twisted Sister and Kiss, Motley Crue, and that. So we bonded over a lot more of that type music. Mm-hmm. And then as I got older and started looking back at other country stuff, and then it was like, my relationship with Uncle Sean changed where we could talk more about music and stuff. Like he softened a little bit more too. He didn't just he would call my music shit and then I'd get pissed off and we argued, right? But he stopped doing that.
So that's where you got it from.
I started listening more, and he taught me one of the greatest lines about music that I've ever heard. And he said, there's only 2 kinds of music in this world. There's good and bad. And that's it. Those are the only 2 kinds of music in the world. Good and bad. And it's like, that's a pretty good point. And it's like, it doesn't matter what style it is. You're going to find good things in every style, and you're going to find bad things in every style. Like, as much as I love Metallica, they're one of my favorite bands, ever, but they have some pretty shitty stuff. Yeah, so it's some really
Lulu.
good stuff.
But here's a thing. In your world and your listening
Yeah.
experience, it's shitty.
It's good and
But
bad to me.
to somebody else, that could be the best thing that they've actually released. And that's the thing about music that is so incredible is it's not listened to by one set of ears only. It's listened
Yeah.
to and filtered through everybody's unique set of hearing.
Yeah.
And the fun part about it, and this probably rolls into how your musical tastes have evolved over the years, is you're not in control of what you like. It's a visceral thing. It's kind of like reading the liner notes. You've got that thing in your hand, but music is a visceral thing and how it affects you. And it literally affects you. It's not something that you can choose how it's going to affect you. And part of that is based on your entire life experience. So if you're watching a movie and it's got a soundtrack and there's a piece of that movie that affects you and there's some music playing in the background, that programs you. How does it program you?
Oh,
Well,
like-
now you're being influenced and now your tastes are changing and evolving. And it could be that you're walking through a mall holding hands with your wife and it's Christmas and you hear a song playing and now that starts to affect you. And all these different influences that you're not even necessarily seeking are programming you
I
and
definitely
influencing
have
you.
certain girls in my life that correspond with certain bands.
Yeah.
That it was like, this band came out and I listened to them a lot when I was dating this girl.
I think your screen's frozen again.
Is it? Yeah.
It is. But
So we're-
we're also at 1 hour on the nail.
Well,
So
1 hour in. So I think we should just stop now as our introduction episode. I think everybody's got a good feel who and what we are, where we came from, and we can definitely discuss more of these feelings like later on with different topics, different subjects, and stuff like that. But
pick a topic and deep dive.
yeah, we'll go on that.
Delve in.
I think it's a good one. Getting a better understanding of each other with certain things and stuff and where we came from and things we can only expand on that in the future. So with that, I'm going to say I'm out. Goodbye.
Pleasure.
Yep, me too. I'll kill the
See you on
recording.
the next one. So that's the first episode of Let's Talk Music with Adam, Rob, and Colin.
Ciao.